that their existence means nothing. That was a quote translated from Swedish from my latest play, Mens Rea, which is Latin for guilty mind, which depicts a woman who is recruited to and gradually indoctrinated in a cult or totalitarian movement with diabolical plans and devastating consequences. Before we begin, I'd like to give you some background about myself. My name is, as I said, Rebecca Pershagen. I am originally trained as an actress and a playwright. I got my BFA from the Academy of Music and Drama at Gothenburg University, in Swedish Teaterhögskolan. And I am currently a student at the Department of Psychology at Stockholm University, where I'm getting my Master of Psychology, in Swedish Psykologprogrammet. I have been creating artistic pieces since 2009, and I've always had a special interest in social psychology and cults in particular, as I've described them as being the concentrate of our deepest and sometimes most destructive social driving forces, urges, and needs. The play, Mens Rea, premiered in September 2020, and I was very fascinated as a common reaction from those around me during the research process was, oh, but that would never happen to me. So with the play and this lecture, I wanted to show you some signs of the opposite. Many years ago, I heard someone claim that only 5% of the population is immune to being indoctrinated into a cult. This then means that 95% of us, under the right or wrong circumstances, run the risk of being indoctrinated. So by means of key social psychological terms and concepts, with this lecture, I want to explain why I think this percentage might be closer to reality than what we would like to admit, and also share some of my own thoughts on cult-like phenomena in our societal domain. And one aspect worth highlighting, and which was also one of the entry points to my entire work, was the dramatic increase we have seen in involuntary loneliness or isolation that was prevalent even before the COVID-19 pandemic, and what societal consequences are yet to be seen mid or post-pandemic. So regarding the presentation, I would say that it's sort of divided into three main parts. So from a perspective of social psychology, I will discuss some fundamental societal phenomena that I've thought about. I will try and explain the process of indoctrination. And lastly, I will also give some examples of cult-like contemporary phenomena that I have seen during this past year and also before that. And before we begin, a few things to note. The term cult I will use as an umbrella term for both religious, political, and other totalitarian movements. Number two, the research for this lecture and the play is vast, but for legal reasons, there will be a very limited mentions of specific individuals, people, or groups. Thirdly, all opinions presented here are, of course, my own. And lastly, if you, the people watching, have any questions, you can write in the Facebook live stream chat or on YouTube, where I think this is also being broadcast. And after I have spoken in about, I think, 35 minutes, I will log on and I will receive all of your questions. So I hope you can stay tuned until then. So let's begin. I want to start with a quote that you already saw on the front page and already as the title for this entire lecture, which in many ways can summarize my view and analysis. Nobody joins a cult. they join a good thing, said by former Nexia member Mark Vicente in the acclaimed documentary series The Vow. Here you can see an overview of some social psychological key concepts I will present during the lecture, and as you can see, they are separated by a red line or arrow. This is because the two on the left are some major societal phenomena, sorry about that, and structures I see, and the four remaining on the right mark different stages or parts of the indoctrination process. So let's start from the beginning. Statements like the one made by those around me about my play are a sign of the fundamental attribution error, which is defined as overestimating personality rather than situational and environmental impact regarding other people's social behavior. If I stumbled and fell, it was because the floor or street was slippery. But if someone else did it, it's because they are clumsy. As you probably understand, this exists in endless variations throughout society. Through this phenomenon, many destructive and incorrect views can give rise to major societal problems in terms of prejudice. A current example that is fortunately beginning to be disproven thanks to the great societal debate is that women who stay in violent relationships are weak. Cult members are then assumed by many to have an innate weaker psyche that is more susceptible to brainwashing, when in fact it's probably more about environmental and situational circumstances, such as a traumatic life event, a recent move to a new city or country, both early and recent events which can lead to indoctrination. Through prejudice, thoughts about stereotypes can also be formed, and vice versa. Stereotypes are one of the most important consequences of categorization, on which we base our future expectations. Sorry, just need to cough. Very dry right now. So, to get back, one of the most important consequences of categorization on which we base our future expectations. But the results of stereotyping can be both positive, such as avoiding impending threats, but also destructive and incorrect. The fictional stereotypes we are surrounded by through feature films and TV series regarding cult leaders and followers give us a false sense of security regarding that we would recognize that type of person a mile away, and therefore we can easily avoid them. As the true crime trend also has reached new peaks in contemporary society, I've also experienced a boom of widespread documentary material of famous cult leaders such as Jim Jones, leader of the People's Temple, David Koresh, leader of the Branch Davidians, and Marshall Applewhite, leader of Heaven's Gate, all of whom perished in mass suicides or violent shootouts and fires together with their respective groups or congregations, from 30 up to 909 people, and that all three of them also had initiated. The documentary material often focuses on all of their crazy beliefs, which further cement both prejudice and false security and lead us to that both the leaders, but mainly the followers, are dismissed by means of combinations of victim blaming. What did they expect getting involved with a maniac like that? Hindsight bias. Oh, anyone could have figured out that it would end up like that. and also our thoughts on cult followers as an alien, homogeneous outgroup, and that they look, think, and behave in the same way, in contrast to the familiar, heterogeneous in-group we are under the belief that we ourselves belong to, such as our group of friends. Here, I want to mention another quote, which social psychologist Elliot Aronson highlights as his first law. People who do crazy things are not necessarily crazy. How we see or choose to look at the world is also strongly influenced by our own needs and desires, which Susan Fiske describes through 5 core motives for social cognition. The need for social belonging is superior to all other motives and needs, and can then be considered the main driving force for all our actions and cognitions. In cults, the sense of social belonging is the primary promise. There's already a relatively constructed group which is just waiting for you to belong to and to be included in under certain conditions, of course. Regardless of your current life situation, all of you who are watching right now, I don't think there's any person out there who has not felt alone or involuntarily socially excluded from a group during some part of your lives, and whose highest wish was just to belong. Therefore, generalizing or stereotyping cult members as special cases, lone wolves, or outcasts is therefore as naive as it is risky. Many seemingly successful or acclaimed people, such as Hollywood celebrities, have been involved in, and some are still active, in cult-like movements. So in addition to group affiliation, we can probably find explanations for their and many others' involvement in such movements in the other 4 core motifs, which are control, wanting to understand, a positive self-esteem, and trust. In Nexium, for example, founded and led by Keith Raniere, who is now serving several life sentences, I see the outwards facade as promises of self-development, in-depth knowledge of and control over oneself and one's private life and career, to better understand how the world works, to be able to achieve your full potential under the leadership of initiated people, and also, of course, in a group of like-minded people who have also understood. There we can therefore see how all 5 motifs can work together. Now on to the process of indoctrination. Going from a complete outsider to becoming a dedicated cult member never happens overnight, but instead is the result of usually a very long and well-calculated mental and social process, some of which are described by Tjärnström in a portion of her thesis. I will give you sources at the end of this lecture. It often begins with the foot in the door technique, where smaller acts of service lead to larger requests gradually. An unplanned meeting with a recruiter in public, where the recruiter asks the person questions about any dissatisfaction or problems in life, and where all the problems can be easily solved or answered with the group's mindset is presented, combined with an offer that is too good to refuse, such as attending a group meeting together, and where a refusal of this offer would possibly trigger feelings of guilt, as the recruiter spent time listening and really cares about me. Once inside the meeting with the group, the effective process, that is love bombing, begins, where the person is showered with love and kindness from other members, and where the attention gives the feeling of being chosen or seen. Based on the outcome, the step thereafter, for some, is not far towards moving into the 3 parts of conformity, as described by, for example, Elliot Aronson. Obedience and approval, here motivated by more or bigger rewards from the group. Identification, wanting to be more like the group or the group leader. And internalization, adopting the group's way of thinking and their values. Once a person is in an infatuation phase with an idealization of the group, however, choices must be made, with sacrifices, to prove their dedication through a phase of bridge burning. Here, the great transition from one in-group to another takes place by, for example, the contact with friends or family, everyone outside the group, being radically reduced or completely terminated, by relocation of residency to get closer to the group is encouraged or imposed, and any studies or careers must be terminated or changed. With this type of isolation, the person, albeit blinded by the infatuation phase, becomes extremely vulnerable as fundamental navigation points for behavior and routines are taken away. Since all forms of uncertainty are what we cognitively struggle to avoid, various rationalization processes become necessary to maintain a basic positive self-image, to reduce the cognitive dissonance that arises when a person is confronted with a group's demands for sacrifices, dubious information, or is forced to act against their own beliefs. When the identification with a group also becomes fundamental to the self, the cohesion of the group is also what is most important to perpetuate, not wise decisions, which is the foundation for groupthink. At the most advanced step, defined as mind control or brainwashing, I see how 4 of the basic core motifs, control, wanting to understand, a positive self-esteem, and trust, either have been completely eradicated or severely minimized. And the 5th, social belonging, has changed from the loving environment that the person initially experienced to now being variations of mental prisons. All core motifs are also constantly pushed to their breaking points by 2 general types of uncertainty, described as either uncertainty about what we or others think, which is then cognition, or the uncertainty about predicting our own or other people's behavior and what behavior is expected of us. Within cults, the erraticness of authoritarian figures' behavior, motifs, mood, and commands are often fundamental and extremely effective in keeping cult members insecure, alert, and most importantly, submissive. Jim Jones often held mock suicides, where cult members would be demanded to show their dedication by drinking what Jones claimed was poison, but which later turned out to have been juice. Unfortunately, not in the final mass suicide, where he killed 909 people by giving them cyanide-laced juice. David Koresh dissolved the marriages between all cult members of the Branch Davidians in order to marry basically all of the female members himself, and also have children with as many of them as possible. Keith Raniere from Nexium got women to be initiated into the subgroup DOS by means of an hour-long branding process in their groin area, where they took turns holding down each other. In none of these cases did the cult members protest openly. When groups isolate themselves from the outside world with its disgusting views, a breeding ground is created for concentrated groupthink, with consensus within the group as the highest priority, and where all external threats, such as truthful information from the outside world, is not only neglected or censored by the group's appointed or unnamed mind guards, but is also punished if they turn out to have been sprung from a group member's own thoughts or doubts. Implementing punishments in front of or with the help of the remaining group members, such as assault or total exclusion, also automatically increases all three previously mentioned forms of conformity among the group members in order to avoid these types of punishments themselves. Reporting negative or dangerous behavior within the group to the authority figures is not uncommon, but is often encouraged by the leader as a way to be able to further gain rewards. So, how is it possible for a human being to perform acts such as assault or maybe even torture? Worth highlighting here are the different forms of self-justification: external, internal, and insufficient justification. In everyday life, white lies are often used to avoid hurting other fellow human beings' feelings as a good example of external justification that reduces the situation-based cognitive dissonance that arises from lying if I myself see myself as an honest person. I think the dress was ugly, but I told her she looked nice not to hurt her feelings is just one example that most of you can probably relate to. But it acts such as bullying, violent crimes, or even torture, where cognitive dissonance is likely to arise for most of us. There are sometimes no obvious situation-based aspects that can explain or justify the act. Instead, often a gradual internal justification begins, which actually leads to a fundamental change in attitude, where the person then sees his actions as both necessary and defensible and justifiable. The lack of external justification can then lead us to the saying is believing paradigm. That we even begin to believe the self-constructed lies we have used for justification. I have also included the term insufficient justification, where studies have shown that our cognitive dissonance is more easily resolved if we are offered a smaller rather than a bigger reward for acting against our own beliefs. Here, for example, this may be the smaller reward we gain from avoiding punishment by committing an act of violence in comparison to being given the opportunity for a greater reward, such as being elevated to a higher position within the group if the act of violence is performed. Variations on punishments, groupthink, and justification are common within cults and can have such macabre consequences as within Anthill Kids, where they amputated their body parts while fully awake and also murdered their own children, or within Aum Shinrikyo, where members carried out a fatal gas attack in the Tokyo subway in 1995. So why do cult members stay in groups that have escalated into physical and mental terror? Of course, the reasons are many, but I think most can be rooted in one of the, in my opinion, main framing effects of our mental decision-making processes in what is called representativeness heuristics, the sunk cost fallacy. Originally an economic term, but very often used within psychology as well. And the sunk cost fallacy is where decisions about a current situation are based on what you have previously invested in that given situation. If you have already given enormous amounts of time, money, and energy to something you once believed in, there is a great risk that you will continue to act against common sense, such as leaving the group, and instead continue in the group, hoping that things will get better or as they used to be, even if you have not been given any signs of improvement. And when you have already burned all the bridges, as the cult demanded, to your old life, what do you have to return to? Your security and identity now exist only within the cult, and the outside world, which you once left, is suddenly the unknown and frightening, which the cult often points out to you. Although examples of cult indoctrination feel foreign to most people, I often see examples of the sunk cost fallacy in my everyday life. People who openly complain about their jobs or their partners for years, but still never seem to change either job or partners, is a good example. And now on to the final part, some contemporary phenomena that I reflected upon whilst making this lecture. For me, it's impossible in 2021 to remember a time when self-development in an infinite number of forms has not been extremely relevant and present in society, or even constantly encouraged. Because who doesn't want to achieve peace of mind or success? In what I see as a relatively secular society, I can understand that religiously based cults are sometimes viewed with some hesitation, as I see the everyday person reluctant to voluntarily limiting or changing routines in their everyday life based on a newly found religious belief, and where the reward might not even be in this life, but in the next, for which you must now work to earn. Instead, I see the cult of the self as the new faith in God. You yourself are the one most involved in both creating, seeing the results of, and benefiting from different changes. I see this reflected in the fact that, for example, NXIVM and many more well-known totalitarian movements never mention the word God, higher power, or the afterlife, but everything is instead about what you yourself accomplish to reach your maximum potential here and now in this life. Within both NXIVM and many more well-known totalitarian movements with big Hollywood celebrities as members, the recruitment of new members in combination with personal financial efforts, for example, higher courses, more advanced courses with course literature, are fundamental for the movement, which makes me see similarities between their financial structure and well-known multi-level marketing companies, where some are often referred to as versions of pyramid schemes. Like charismatic cult leaders and members, pyramid scheme recruiters are also often described as masters of group psychology. New recruitment of members to pyramid scheme activities often take place through enthusiastic mass meetings where great financial success in the form of a life-changing opportunity is promised, but only if you act now. Like the People's Temple, where certain members posed as wheelchair-bound in order to get healed on stage during mass meetings by Jim Jones and stop walking again, testimonials from senior members' alleged success stories are a common feature of recruitment meetings and also a big warning sign indicating a pyramid scheme, according to, for example, the Federal Trade Commission Consumer Information. Other warning signs include that you yourself must recruit additional distributors, make large purchases of inventory, and that you are urged to act as soon as possible. Within Nexium, the new recruitment of more members was packaged as something natural. When you think our movement is so fantastic, why wouldn't you want to save the entire world? And was later something that was mandatory and that was directly related to how high you had the opportunity to climb within the group through more advanced courses for larger sums of money. In our screen-based society, where we are constantly urged to be critical and aware of dubious sources, which can prove more difficult said than done with new innovations such as deepfakes, I see how the internet and its sometimes anti-reality, in contrast to physical encounters, can present totalitarian or cult-like tendencies within two contemporary phenomena: web-based conspiracy theory groups and also influencer culture. Led by Q, who is said to be a high-ranking government official who leaks secrets to thousands of followers, members of the conspiracy theory group QAnon have been seen as partly or mainly responsible for both the storming of the Capitol in January of this year and the Pizzagate attack on Comet Ping Pong in 2016. Like interpretations of religious scriptures, I note how Q's cryptic messages posted on sites like 8chan are interpreted or deciphered in infinite instances by dedicated members who spread them further and who all share a basic belief that we are all being lied to by the people in power. The notion of fake news that they're trying to battle as they claim that they're the only truth, isolation from the outside world in closed rooms online, and blind faith in the commands and messages from a known or unknown truth teller or leader, I see increasing in most extremist organizations worry me deeply, especially because we have seen several times that strange theories from anonymous online trolls can actually escalate into physical terror and violence and attacks on society. I also see a often reciprocal relationship between major pop culture influencers or leaders and their followers on social media regarding the previously mentioned cult of the self. Just the fact that the term for being an admirer on social media is referred to as being a follower, I think that is particularly interesting. Enormous amounts of work and a unique idea or personality are required to be able to gain a platform with thousands or maybe even millions of followers in the fierce competition for attention on social media. After an initial breakthrough and boom in followers, the pressure is enormous to keep the attention and the followers. Building your brand is a key focus to create a trademark for both the followers, not completely different from most major cults, and for your sources of income, such as businesses or advertising collaborations. Slowly, the boundary between spectacle and reality is blurred, as the influencer must create an everyday lifestyle and truth with opinions and values that appear desirable for both groups, often at the expense of contact with the outside world, simply for time-pressed reasons. External threats, such as newer or hotter influencers, combined with self-monitoring, how should I be for my followers to want to stay with me? And an escalating stress to create and publish new content constantly, thus creates a self-chosen surveillance for the large part of life, with a constant fear of punishment in the form of followers' admiration shifting towards criticism, which in the worst case escalates to cancel culture, deplatforming, exclusion, with lost financial income, and you are forgotten. Who are you then in, and what is left of reality? Many influencers have admitted that after years of extreme narrative control, they no longer knew who they were, as everything, socializing, activities, interests, lifestyle, was curated to show how they should be. In addition to threats and violence, various cult defectors have talked about how constant, grueling physical work with extreme food and sleep deprivation are effective methods for breaking down members, as well as minimizing their opportunities for a normal perception of reality due to exhaustion. And as you can see, two of these groups are white labeled, and that is because during the research process for this lecture, what I read is that there has been a significant increase in both of these groups during COVID-19, with recruitment and the amount of members rising. So for some final thoughts, statistically, a minority of us become cult members, but the mechanisms regarding various forms of indoctrination are prevalent throughout our time and society. In addition to acknowledging our fundamental need for group affiliation, I believe we must also acknowledge and forgive the nagging feeling of confusion or insecurity I see us all carry in various forms and bravely hide, which can lead us to inconsistent action. In a world full of possibilities, it often seems expected of us that we already have all the answers or a plan, which is rarely true. The shame of being lost in different life situations must be fought so that quick fixes and golden promises do not seem like the alluring solution that they often seem to be. And most important of all, we must remind ourselves that it always could have been me, who is the cult survivor that we see on TV. We are all born with the same needs, and it's chance or fate that has decided that it's not yet you. Thank you so very much. I can only see myself as I'm on Zoom. I unfortunately can't see any of you. I hope you have enjoyed this. Here is my contact information, my email, and also where you can find some of my web material. And whilst I turn on my phone and able to read some questions that might have come in, I don't know, I haven't seen anything, I will give you this slide with some of my sources. Please feel free to contact me if you have any more interest in what I've talked about, but these main sources I would really recommend. The book, The Social Animal by Ellie Aronson, amazing. The bachelor thesis, Manipulativa sekter, is amazing when in regards to indoctrination. The 3 podcasts, Sekter on Spotify, P1 and P3 Dokumentär, various episodes there. The American Psychological Association and their dictionary, if you want to read more about special terms. And also the 2 amazing documentary series, The Vow, which is about Nexium, and Q Into the Storm, which is about QAnon. Both of them are available on HBO. So let's see, do I have any questions? Oh my God, yes I do. So I can't unfortunately see because I'm getting them in a DM from the host. So unfortunately I can't see who has posted these questions, but I'm very happy that you have that you've done it. What is the most surprising fact you have found in your research? Oh my God, well, apart from the obviously completely, for some of us, there is no way to understand how you can physically torture your own child or amputate your own limbs whilst still awake. For me, that is very hard to imagine, but the most surprising fact, I would say, is that I wouldn't call myself jaded, but I would say that basically nothing surprises me anymore because I know by now that during the right or wrong circumstances, through manipulation and brainwashing, you can get people to do basically anything. So apart from being horrified and feeling enormous sadness very often when I read about what people have been manipulated into going through, that is the most surprising fact. I don't know if that's a good answer to the question, but get in touch with me and we can discuss more specific things about cults all over the world. Next question. Physical violence is often a part of cult culture, primarily internally among cult members. Is this a necessary component? Why do some cults mostly direct violence externally, such as terrorist groups? Oh my God, this varies a lot. As I said, due to limited mentions, legal reasons, I won't mention any specific groups, since this is a public lecture. It varies a lot, often being extremely excluded, such as people, not even the group of people, the family that you've grown up with and have your identity with. For them, from one day to another, for them to not even look you in the eye, never talk to you again. That sort of total exclusion can sometimes replace violence. Violence is not even necessary at that point. But violence, I would say, to punish a person, we have a long history of violence in regards to punishing people for making them admit things or stuff like that. False confessions are very efficient to get through violence. And also, as I emphasized, violence is most efficient if it's performed towards an individual cult member in front of the rest of the cult members, because their own memory of being punished, of course, is horrible, but it's even more efficient for submissiveness if the entire cult is standing by, even helping and looking at this helpless person being subjected to this, which makes them more submissive. And also with the whole justification that I talked about for them to also participate. Why do some cults mostly direct violence externally, such as terrorist groups? I'm very interested in terrorist groups as well. I have done a lot of research on the Red Army fraction, the Baader-Meinhof League. They are not primarily really included in this lecture that almost demands an entirely different hour to talk about. But in some cases, it's about the injustice in the world. If you have amped up this whole group to think that the outside world that they have left are, doomed for death, or they are ruining it for all the rest of you, you might even think that you are saving them. Sometimes the motive is to punish other people or sinners that are not part of the group, and that is why it's performed. But in extremely a lot of cases, killing strangers, people from the outside world, are considered a blessing. You are saving them, because if they can't see that the truth, which is that your group are the only ones going to heaven or to a better place, if they can't join them voluntarily themselves and see that, you have to help them by killing them. So often it's both acts of violence and I would say rage, but also mercy. Which leads back to the first question, an interesting fact. Not many times it's about violence and punishment, but about mercy, saving them from themselves. Do I have any more questions? Hello? I'm not getting anything. Are we, do you want to go offline then? Nia, if you are the host, which is amazing. Oh, no more questions, no more questions. And a smiley face. But in that case, it is 10 to 1. Or is there a question coming in? I will see. It's, the 3 dots. God, it's so weird not being able to see you. I'm only seeing myself, very egocentric, I know. But if you don't want to ask your question now, you can email me at this email address. If you go to that website as well, I have a collection of links where you can read more about my work, the play, mens rea, etc. And it's really been a pleasure talking to you and in front of you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the THS Mental Health Week 2021. I know I have. And thank you so much for listening. Hopefully there was someone listening to this. Until we see each other again, thank you so much and goodbye.